So I've had the opportunity to speak with some of you during the dinner, and I feel that there's an overall understanding amongst us on the importance of law, and more specifically on the importance of law within the Palestinian context. And I think I can also assume that many of you believe that law is a potential solution to the Palestinian predicament. And I would agree with you simply for the reason that international law, as it is written, supports the Palestinian struggle for freedom and self-determination. And on top of that, as we all know, Israel holds the world record for blatant violations of international law. Indeed, Israel commits one crime after another, after another, after another. And just to give you a reminder of the crimes that we have witnessed, we've seen the dispossession and violent takeover of Palestine by Israel and the denial of the right of return for the Palestinian refugees. We've seen torture, illegal detention of children, assassinations, assaults against civilians with missiles, helicopters, and jet fighters. We've seen the continued illegal annexation of territory and demolition of homes on an unthinkable scale. We've seen daily humiliation and suffering at illegal checkpoints, and we've seen the mass killing of Palestinians in Sabra, Shatila, Jenin, Qana, and Gaza. The list is endless. But I'm not here to depress you, but rather my message for you today is that there is finally a legal movement to hold Israel accountable for crimes committed against the Palestinian people and to deter future crimes from being committed. And this movement is driven by people like you and me, lawyers, students, activists, academics, and so on. And it's driven primarily by civil society because we are fed up of empty statements given by world leaders who claim that Israel is acting illegally but end up doing nothing about it. And because Israel will only change if we force it to. So having set the legal background, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our organization, the Palestine Legal Aid Fund, and then I'm going to describe two cases that we are currently supporting. Our motivation is driven by two fundamental beliefs, which I've touched on earlier. One, providing access to justice to the Palestinians, and two, in securing accountability on the part of Israelis and their supporters who generally consider themselves above the law. Therefore, to that end, we have set up a professionally managed organization which has a sole purpose: to identify, fund, and facilitate strategic legal action in support of the Palestinian people. The goal is to create a coordinated, strategic, and sustainable effort to bring the Palestinian cause before international courts. The movement is unprecedented in the Palestinian context because of a few barriers. But the main barrier is that international lawyers who support the Palestinians are expected to work on a voluntary basis. While this may be commendable, it can never amount to a long-term effort to provide Palestinians with the highest quality legal representation. And it is this, not continued humanitarian aid, which offers Palestinians hope. Therefore, the Palestine Legal Aid Fund facilitates this work and financially supports these lawyers who take on cases on behalf of the Palestinian people. The fund engages them on significantly reduced rates, and we are responsible for making sure that the milestones are set and met and that the cases progress. So to tell you a little bit about our internal governance, we are incorporated in the UK as a non-profit organization with exclusively charitable objects. We are completely independent in our decision-making processes and are not influenced by any political or corporate agenda. We have established important partnerships. Our main partner in the occupied West Bank is Al-Haq, probably the most well-established human rights NGO on the ground. All the directors of the fund are volunteers, and we are highly qualified in both the legal and corporate worlds. We have an advisory board of international lawyers, academics, doctors, military experts, and human rights observers. Our main advisor in Jordan is jurist Dr. Anis Qasim. We were inspired by the International Defense and Aid Fund in South Africa, which dedicated £100 million to support legal actions against the apartheid state over the course of 30 years. They supported Nelson Mandela's defense against the death penalty in 1964. So it was a very effective organization and one that we hope we will replicate, if not surpass, in terms of achievements. So that's enough about that. If you have any questions about our structure or mission, I'd be happy to answer them later. But the point I want to stress is, if it wasn't for the Palestine Legal Aid Fund, very few legal cases in support of Palestinians would currently be pursued. And to give you an example, to illustrate the importance of our work, I'd like to draw your attention to two cases that we are currently supporting. One related to the recent attack on the flotilla, and the second related to Jerusalem. So starting with the attack on the flotilla, as you all know, the Freedom Flotilla was a group of 6 vessels carrying humanitarian aid to Gaza. The flotilla was attacked by the Israeli military exactly 1 month ago in the middle of the night and in international waters. 9 activists were murdered in the attack and dozens were wounded, and hundreds of activists were illegally abducted and imprisoned. So after we had recovered from the shock of the attack, my team, understanding the gravity and criminality of the attack, immediately engaged and funded UK lawyers who prepared legal advice for passengers. This advice was translated and disseminated to many of the detainees and subsequently adopted and disseminated by Amnesty International. These lawyers then prepared questionnaires for the detainees and collected eyewitness testimonies, which were then compiled into a database. The fund supported this because we knew that any other future legal action or investigation would depend crucially on the preservation and collection of evidence sufficient to meet legal standards. Since that stage has been completed, we now believe that a series of war crimes were and/or continue to be committed by the Israeli forces. These include willful killing, inhumane treatment, willfully causing great suffering or serious injury, unlawful deportation or transfer, unlawful confinement, taking of hostages, extensive appropriation of property, and theft by the Israeli military. So all in all, in light of the nature of these crimes committed against international passengers, we are now presented with a unique opportunity to address Israel's conduct in courts around the world. Therefore, the Palestine Legal Aid Fund has now engaged a legal team to coordinate an international legal committee, which includes key lawyers from 24 countries who represent the individuals on board. The committee will enable the sharing of evidence and expertise to ensure that the best cases are brought to court. And we now believe there is sufficient evidence capable of supporting the arrest and charges against specific Israeli officials. In fact, the fund is already supporting 2 important cases. One case will shortly be launched in Belgium against Israeli officials on behalf of the 5 Belgian citizens that were on board the flotilla. The other case, which will also be launched shortly in Spain, is against Israeli officials on behalf of the Spanish citizens who are on the flotilla. These are actual concrete cases that seek to hold Israeli officials criminally liable for their actions. We are also supporting lawyers who are determining whether the International Criminal Court may be an avenue to achieve legal redress. And the reason I'm going into detail on the flotilla cases is to make the following points. 1, the legal route is available and waiting for us to take advantage of it. 2, the lawyers are there. They're ready to do the work in a professional way at very reduced rates. But without the fund, none of this work would have happened, and very little future work will happen. We are finally living in a moment where we can tell Israel no more. We are not taking it anymore, and if this criminal behavior does not stop, we will make it stop.